The night of March 14, 2019, Ryan Callahan ran into a burning building on DeQuindra Street in Cleveland and died. He wasn't supposed to. The structure was already compromised. His supervisor had called it. "Pull back," the radio said. "Pull back now." But Ryan had counted the windows. He had done the math in his head the way he always did, the way his training at Cuyahoga Community College had made instinct. 4 floors, 3 units per floor, 12 possible apartments, 8 accounted for, 4 unknown. He went in anyway. He came out carrying a woman named Mrs. Elaine Ferris, age 71, who had a cat named Biscuit tucked under her arm and hadn't been able to find her walker. Behind him came 2 of his colleagues, each carrying someone they had found only because Ryan had told them exactly which door to break down. 14 people walked out of that building alive. Ryan was 29 years old. He had been an EMT with Cleveland Fire and EMS for 6 years. He had a daughter named Gracie, who was 8 years old and had a heart the size of a closed fist that had never quite worked right. He had a mortgage on a 2-bedroom house on East 105th Street. He had $11,400 in savings and $38,000 in medical debt. He also had, until that night, a clean record. The fire report came back 6 weeks later. Somewhere in the administrative chain, a supervisor's notes, a dispatch log, a form that had been misfiled, Ryan's name appeared attached to a decision he had not made. The report said he had exceeded protocol without authorization. It said he had re-entered after being ordered to stand down. He had. What the report did not say, what no one seemed to be able to make the report say, was that he had been right. That 14 people were alive because of it. The report was a document. Documents don't carry weight like that. Documents carry liability. His license was suspended pending review. The review took 4 months. During those 4 months, he couldn't work. His savings ran out in the 2nd month. His medical debt kept growing because Gracie's cardiology appointments didn't pause for paperwork. The review board found against him. He lost his certification. He lost his job. He lost the apartment they moved to after he had to sell the house. He found work at a warehouse on Euclid Avenue. Night shifts, $17.40 an hour. He dropped Gracie at school every morning, picked her up every afternoon. He did whatever was cheapest at the grocery store on Kinsman Road, and sat with her while she did her homework at the kitchen table until she fell asleep. He never told her how bad it was. He told her they were in a transition. He told her transitions were normal. He told her that people who were brave enough to change were the ones who ended up with the best stories. Gracie had nodded seriously, the way 8-year-olds do when they want you to believe they understand. Then she asked if they could have pancakes on Sunday. They had pancakes every Sunday after that. Claire Whitfield was not a careless person. She would have told you that. The people who worked for her would have told you that. The shareholders of Whitfield Capital Group, which she had grown from a regional insurance firm into a $2.30 billion conglomerate over 14 years, would have told you that. She was meticulous. She worked 15-hour days. She read every contract before she signed it, except for the ones she didn't. On September 3, 2018, a Thursday, Claire had 4 board meetings, a call with a senator from Ohio about regulatory restructuring, a flight to Chicago, and a dinner she was already dreading. Her assistant Marcus had slid a folder across her desk at 7:42 a.m. with the words routine approvals. She had signed the top 3 documents without reading them, because she trusted Marcus, because Marcus trusted the legal team, because the legal team had flagged nothing, because routine had a way of becoming dangerous only in retrospect. One of those documents was a policy adjustment. It restructured the liability framework that Whitfield Capital used to process claims from municipal emergency workers. It added a provision, small, specific, buried in subsection 4(c), that made it significantly easier for insurance carriers to deny supplemental coverage to MTs whose incidents involved disputed protocol violations. It was legal. It had been crafted to be legal. Ryan Callahan's name was not in that document. He was just a number, a category, a claim type. But 14 months after Claire signed that form without reading it, the system it created processed Ryan's case the way it had been designed to process cases like his, efficiently, conclusively, and without mercy. Claire did not know his name for another 3 years. She found out the way she found out about most things, by accident, and too late. It was a Tuesday in November, raining hard. Ryan was cutting through the parking lot of the Marriott on Carnegie Avenue on his way back to his car. He had just finished a 12-hour warehouse shift. His jacket wasn't waterproof. His boots had a slow leak in the left sole. He was thinking about whether Gracie had remembered to take her medication before school when his foot hit something. He looked down. A bag. Small, black canvas, unzipped at the top. He crouched, picked it up, opened it. $60,000 in banded bills. Used. 20s and 50s. The kind of cash that doesn't come from a bank withdrawal. He stood there in the rain for a full minute without moving. His hands were steady. That was the thing people would not believe later. His hands were steady. He was looking at money that could pay off every dollar of Gracie's medical debt. Could fix the leak in his boot and the radiator in his car. Could maybe, give him enough runway to fight the certification board one more time. He closed the bag. He walked to the hotel entrance. The front desk manager, a young woman named Destiny, who was used to handling the lost and found and not bags of cash, called her supervisor, who called security, who called the general manager, who came down in a tie and a look on his face like he expected Ryan to have a weapon. Ryan set the bag on the counter. "Found it in the lot," he said. "East side, near the 3rd row. They asked for his name and number. They asked if he wanted to wait. He said no. He said he had to get home to his daughter." He walked back to his car in the rain. He drove home. He heated soup. He did not tell Gracie. He did not think there was anything to tell. Claire had been on the 14th floor when it happened. She hadn't been watching. Not really. She had been on a call with her CFO, pacing near the window the way she did when she needed to think, and the movement in the parking lot below had caught her eye the way movement always does. Peripheral. Automatic. A man crouching. Standing. Walking. She watched him go inside. She watched him come out 8 minutes later without the bag. She pulled up the hotel security feed on her laptop. She was a partial owner of the property, which meant she had access, and watched it again. And again. She watched a man in a soaked jacket with a slow leak in one boot find $60,000 and give it back. No hesitation at the desk. No negotiation. He put it on the counter and asked for nothing. She sat down. The call with her CFO was still going. She put it on mute. She sat there for a long time. She had spent 14 years making decisions about systems, about categories and risk models and coverage tiers. She had learned to think about people in aggregate, exposure groups, actuarial tables, claims distributions. It was not that she didn't care about individuals. It was that individuals didn't fit in spreadsheets. The man in the parking lot didn't fit anywhere she was used to looking. She called Marcus. "Find out who he is," she said. The file came back in 48 hours. Marcus was good at his job. The file was thorough. Claire read it in one sitting, which was unusual. She was not a person who sat still. Ryan James Callahan, age 32, former EMT level 3rd, certified by the state of Ohio. Employment terminated March 2019 following disputed protocol investigation. License suspended. License revoked. Currently employed at Secre Logistics, night operations. 1 dependent, Gracie Mae Callahan, age 8. Congenital heart condition, bicuspid aortic valve with moderate stenosis. Ongoing cardiology monitoring at Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital. Estimated treatment costs to date, $4,100. Outstanding balance, $3,700. 14 survivors. DeQuindra Street Fire, March 14, 2019. And then, at the bottom of the report, a note from Marcus. The kind of note Marcus added when he thought she needed to see something directly. It was a cross-reference. The policy adjustment, September 2018. Subsection 4. A direct line between the document she had signed without reading and the outcome that had ended Ryan Callahan's career. Claire closed the laptop. She sat in the dark of her office for 17 minutes. She knew because she looked at the clock when she opened the laptop again. She had done a lot of things in her life. Some of them good, most of them efficient. A few of them, she was now understanding, catastrophic. Not because she had meant harm, but because she had signed her name to a system and then gone to dinner. Her hands were shaking. She noticed them shaking. She set them flat on the desk. Then she started planning. The house on East 1/8th Street had been empty for 2 years. It was a 1940s craftsman with a sagging porch, a cracked foundation on one side, and original windows that let the Cleveland wind through like they weren't there. Claire bought it in 10 days for $67,000 cash. She had Marcus handle the paperwork under a shell LLC. She told him why. He didn't argue. She moved in with a suitcase and a coffee maker. She introduced herself to the neighbors as Vicky. She wore jeans. She did not wear the watch. She left a note in Ryan's mailbox, typed, not handwritten, on plain paper. She said she had bought the house on 108 and needed some basic repairs. She had gotten his name from a neighbor. Would he be interested in some work? She could pay $28 an hour and supply the materials. She left her phone number. He called the next morning. His voice on the phone was careful, measured. The voice of someone who had learned not to expect things to be easy. "What kind of repairs?" he asked. "Porch first," she said. "Then windows. Then we'll see." A pause. "I can come take a look Thursday," he said. "Thursday works," she said. She had no idea what she was doing. Not really. She had a plan, technically. But plans and people are different things. He arrived at 8:04 a.m. with a toolbox and a thermos. She had coffee ready. She offered him a cup before he had even gotten up the porch steps, and he looked at her like that was an unexpected thing, which told her something. He walked the porch for 20 minutes without speaking much. He crouched at the corners. He tested boards with his heel. He looked at the joists underneath with a flashlight and made small sounds that she couldn't interpret. Then he stood up and gave her a number. It was a fair number. She knew because she had gotten 2 other quotes. "That's reasonable," she said. He looked at her for a second. "It's accurate," he said. Not correcting her exactly. Just being specific. She noticed that. He started the following Monday. He came every morning at 8. He worked until 2, which she later learned was when he had to leave to pick up Gracie. He was meticulous and quiet. He cleaned up every day before he left. He used screws where the original builder had used nails, which she asked him about on the 3rd day. "Nails pull out," he said. "Screws hold." She thought about that more than was probably warranted. On the 2nd week, he brought Gracie on a Saturday. School was out for a teacher development day. Gracie sat on the steps in a yellow coat and read a book about ocean animals while Ryan worked. At one point, she climbed up next to him and pointed at something in the wood and asked a very specific question about grain direction that Claire did not know the answer to, and Ryan did. Claire brought out hot chocolate without being asked. Gracie accepted it with both hands and said, "Thank you, Vicky." It was the first time someone had called her that, like it was simply her name. It is possible to know someone for only a few weeks and understand them deeply. This was something Claire had not believed before. She believed in process, in track records, in data over impression. But Ryan was readable in a way most people weren't, not because he was simple, but because he was consistent. He was the same person on a bad Tuesday that he was on a good Friday. He didn't perform patience, he had it. He didn't perform competence, he had that too. She watched him with Gracie in the evenings sometimes, when Gracie came with him and did her homework at Claire's kitchen table. He didn't hover. He wasn't the kind of father who made a production of attention. He simply checked in. He brought her a snack. He answered questions when asked and did not offer opinions when they weren't wanted. When Gracie was frustrated with a math problem, he sat down next to her and said, "Okay, start from the beginning. Show me where it stops making sense. Not let me fix this. Start from the beginning." Claire found herself replaying conversations with him at night. Not because she was falling in love with him, or not only because of that, but because he was recalibrating something in her. He was a person who had been ground down by a system she had helped design, and he was still making hot chocolate plans on Sunday mornings and teaching his daughter about grain direction. Still choosing kindness in a parking lot in the rain. She had signed a document that had taken everything from him. She had not known, but not knowing was not the same as being clean. One evening in the third week, she came outside to find him sitting on the finished porch, looking at the street. Not on his phone. Just looking. She sat down in the other chair. They sat there for a while without talking. "You're different from most people who hire contractors," he said eventually. "How so?" "You ask questions like you actually want to know the answers." She looked at the street. "I'm trying to learn things I should have learned a long time ago." He glanced at her. Said nothing. Let it sit. She was aware, in that moment, that she was going to have to tell him the truth. Not because her plan required it, but because he deserved it, and she already knew she was not going to be able to pretend otherwise much longer. She just didn't expect the truth to find him first. It was Gracie who found it. There was a stack of old business magazines in the front room. Claire had bought the house furnished, more or less, from the previous owner's estate, and Gracie, who read everything, had been working her way through them on Saturday mornings while her father worked. It was the November 2022 issue of Forbes, Midwest. The cover story was titled, "Building Differently: How Claire Whitfield is Reshaping Regional Insurance from the Ground Up." There was a photograph. Professional, not formal. Claire in a gray blazer, in an office that cost more per square foot than Ryan's current apartment. Gracie brought the magazine to her father. "Dad," she said, "this is Vicky." Ryan took the magazine. He looked at it for a long time. He didn't say anything. His jaw tightened. A small movement. He set the magazine down on the workbench carefully, the way you set something down when you're trying not to throw it. He called to Claire from the hallway. She came out. She saw the magazine. She saw his face. Something dropped in her chest. "Ryan," she started. "I think we're done for today," he said. Not angry. Worse than angry. Quiet. He put Gracie's coat on. He picked up his toolbox. He walked to the door. "Ryan, please." "I don't know what this was," he said, turning back for just a second. "But whatever it was, I'm not interested in being somebody's project." He left. The porch was finished. The windows were half done. It didn't matter. Claire stood in the empty room for a long time. She had been afraid of this exact moment for weeks. She had told herself she was waiting for the right time. But there is no right time for that kind of truth. There's only the time you choose, and the time that chooses you. She went to the window. He was buckling Gracie into the car. Gracie was looking back at the house with a confused, worried look that an 8-year-old should not have had. Claire put her hand on the glass. She did not call him that night. She called Marcus instead. She told him to finalize the documents they had been preparing. She asked him to schedule the press conference for the following Thursday. Marcus asked if she was sure. She said yes. She did not sleep much that week. She spent most of it at a small desk in the house on East 1/8, reviewing documents, writing and rewriting a statement, and thinking about what it means to make something right when you can never make something undone. On Wednesday evening, Gracie's name appeared on her phone. It was Ryan's number. She knew because she had saved it 3 weeks ago as Ryan, Porch, and had not changed it. "It's Gracie," the small voice said. Claire sat up straight. "Hi, Gracie." "Dad doesn't know I'm calling." A pause. "He's at the hospital with me. I got sick. My heart." Claire was already standing. "What hospital?" "Rainbow Babies. The one on Adalbert." Another pause. "The doctor said I need a procedure. It costs a lot. Dad's in the hallway talking to someone, and he has that face he has when things cost too much." Claire's throat was tight. "Okay, Gracie. I'm coming." "Dad's going to be mad." "That's okay," Claire said. "He's allowed to be." Ryan was in a corridor on the 3rd floor when he saw her. He hadn't expected her. He hadn't even understood how she could have known. His face moved through several things at once: shock, confusion, the residue of the anger from the week before, and something underneath all of it that might have been relief, although he would not have named it that. "Gracie called me," Claire said. He exhaled. "Of course she did. She's worried about you." "She shouldn't be. She should be worried about herself." But his voice was rough. He turned away. His hands were in his pockets. "The procedure costs $48,000. My coverage won't touch it because of a liability classification." He stopped. He knew. She could see it in the way he stopped. He had known for some time, maybe, or he was putting it together now, in real time, in a hospital hallway, and the picture that was forming was not a comfortable one. "The liability classification," she said carefully. "Yeah. Subsection 4, C of the Whitfield Capital Policy Adjustment of September 2018. A long silence. He turned back to her. His eyes were very still. "What did you say?" "That's the provision that denied your supplemental coverage after the DeQuindra Street fire. I signed the document it came from. I didn't read it first." She kept her voice level, not because she felt level, but because he deserved her steady. "I didn't know what it would do to you specifically, but I signed it. It's mine." He didn't move. "I'm not here to pay your bills," she said. "I'm not here to fix this with a check and walk away. I'm going to fix it the right way. I've been working on it all week. There's a press conference tomorrow." "What press conference?" "Sit down," she said. "Please." He sat. She told him everything. It was a Thursday morning in late November. The room at the City Club of Cleveland was full. Claire Whitfield stood at the podium in a plain navy dress. No jewelry except a watch. No prepared smile. The statement she read lasted 11 minutes. She began with the DeQuindra Street fire. She named Ryan Callahan. She described, in specific terms, the administrative process that had resulted in his decertification, and the role that Whitfield Capital's policy architecture had played in ensuring that no appeal could succeed. She named the document. She named the date. She said clearly that she had signed it without reading it. I have spent the last several weeks trying to understand what that failure cost a specific human being, she said. I want to be precise. I'm not talking about an error of intent. I'm talking about an error of attention. I signed my name to something I hadn't read, and a man who ran into a burning building and saved 14 lives lost his career, his home, and his financial stability as a direct result. I'm responsible for that. I am responsible for that. She announced her resignation as CEO, effective immediately. She announced the Gracie's Light Foundation, $90 of her personal assets, established to provide legal support, retraining resources, and financial assistance to emergency service workers whose careers had been ended by disputed administrative findings. She looked directly at the camera. To Ryan Callahan, she said, I am sorry. Not in the way institutions apologize, with language that admits nothing. I'm sorry the way a person is sorry. I was wrong. I caused harm. I knew none of it at the time. That is not an excuse. The room was very quiet. I should have read what I signed. Ryan watched the press conference on his phone in the family waiting area on the third floor of Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital. He watched it twice. Gracie's procedure was scheduled for 7 a.m. the next morning. The billing office had called that afternoon to say the outstanding balance had been resolved, and the procedure was cleared. Ryan had stared at the phone for a long time after that call. He didn't know how to hold all of this at once. He was grateful. He was still angry. He understood that these were not contradictory. He was a man who had spent 3 years believing that the system had simply failed him, a machine error, impersonal and cold. Now he understood there was a name on the machine. A person who had been careless on a Thursday morning and gone to dinner, and never thought about him once. She had thought about him now. Publicly, on the record, under her own name. He didn't know what to do with that. He went in to see Gracie. She was reading the Ocean Animals book, the one she'd had on the porch steps at Claire's house. She looked up when he came in. Did you watch it? She asked. He sat in the chair beside her bed. Yeah. Was she telling the truth? He thought about Claire in the hospital hallway. Her voice. The specific way she had said subsection 4. See? Not like a person reciting a talking point, but like a person who had read it 40 times and couldn't stop reading. Yeah, he said. I think she was. Gracie nodded. Went back to her book. Dad, she said without looking up. Yeah, I like her. He looked at the ceiling. His jaw tightened and then released. I know you do, Bug. The procedure took 4 hours and 12 minutes. Gracie came out with a small bandage over her sternum and a nurse who told Ryan she had asked excellent questions throughout the process. Ryan sat next to her bed for the first 2 hours after she woke up without saying much. He just held her hand. She fell asleep around noon. He went to the window. He looked out at the parking lot below. Gray sky, a few bare trees, one car with its hazard lights on for reasons he couldn't determine. He thought about the parking lot at the Marriott, the rain, the moment he had crouched and opened the bag and seen the money. He had not hesitated. He had not stood there doing math. He had just known. He thought about that, about what it means to know something without thinking about it. His phone had 4 messages from Claire. He had read them all. He had not responded to any of them. He did not respond now. He went back to the chair next to Gracie's bed and sat down again. He was not ready to forgive. He was not sure forgiveness was even the right frame for something this large. You forgive someone who snaps at you when they're tired. What do you do with someone who accidentally dismantled your life and then spent 3 years not knowing, and then found out and chose to say so publicly, under her own name, at the cost of everything she had built. He didn't have a word for that. He sat with Gracie until she woke up again. 3 months passed. Ryan got a call from the Ohio M Certification Board in February. Formal reinstatement of his license, effective March 1st. The board's letter cited new documentation, administrative review, the Gracie's Light Foundation legal team, and the acknowledgement submitted by Whitfield Capital's outgoing CEO. He read the letter at the kitchen table on a Sunday morning while Gracie was making the pancake batter. He had a choice to make. He thought about it for a long time. He thought about the ambulances, about the specific weight of a medical bag and the particular pitch of a radio call. He thought about running toward fire while other people ran away, and he thought about whether that impulse was heroism or just habit. He thought about Mrs. Elaine Ferris and Biscuit the cat. He called his old partner from M's, Marcus Webb, not Marcus, his former assistant. "I got reinstated," Ryan said. "I heard," Marcus said. "You coming back?" Ryan looked at Gracie, who had flour on her nose and was counting chocolate chips one by one into a glass measuring cup. "I don't think so," he said. He had been thinking about something else for weeks. A conversation with a neighbor whose grandson had choked at the dinner table, and no one in the room had known what to do. A memory of a training class he had taught once as a volunteer at a recreation center on Superior Avenue, and the way the people in that class, middle-aged women, teenagers, a man in his 60s who had shaking hands, had looked when they understood that they could do something, when they understood they were not powerless. He filed the paperwork in March. Callahan and Gracie First Aid, Community Emergency Preparedness Education, CPR Certification, Basic Trauma Response, Narcan Training, Pediatric First Aid. First class scheduled for April 12th at the Rec Center on Superior Avenue. He charged $18 a session and waived the fee for anyone who couldn't pay. He taught the first class to 11 people. Gracie came with him. She sat in the front row in a blue cardigan and took notes in a composition notebook, and at the end of the class, when Ryan asked if there were any questions, she raised her hand and asked one, a good one, about the recovery position, before anyone else could. Ryan looked at her for a moment. He answered the question. Part 16. The Woman Learning to be Ordinary. Claire Whitfield moved out of the house on East 1/8th Street in January. She rented a 2-bedroom apartment on Fairmount Boulevard in Cleveland Heights. She furnished it herself, without help, which took longer than it should have. She bought a coffee maker that was not a professional-grade espresso machine, and she used it every morning, and it was fine. She ran the Gracie's Light Foundation from a small office on Euclid Avenue. She had a staff of 7. She answered her own phone most days. She had not spoken to Ryan since the hospital hallway. She thought about him often. She thought about the porch, about sitting in the 2 chairs on a September evening looking at the street, about the way he had said it's accurate instead of that's reasonable, and the way that had told her everything she needed to know about how he moved through the world. She was not trying to earn forgiveness. She understood that forgiveness was not a currency. You couldn't work toward it and receive it like a payment. It was something someone gave you or didn't on their own timeline for their own reasons. She was trying instead to become someone who deserved to be in the same room. She read everything she signed. All of it. She had Marcus, her new Marcus, a 24-year-old from Youngstown named Deshawn, flag anything in subsection level language for a second review. She had Deshawn read it aloud to her when she was tired. In February, she taught herself to make soup from scratch. She was not good at it. She kept at it. The East Side Community Health Fair was on a Saturday in late April. Callahan and Gracie First Aid had a booth. Ryan had borrowed 2 folding tables from the rec center. Gracie had made a banner on poster board in blue and yellow marker. Callahan and Gracie, we teach you what to do. She had drawn a small heart next to her name, and a first aid cross, and what appeared to be a fish, though she declined to explain the fish. They were teaching knot tying for tourniquet application when Claire walked by. She almost didn't stop. She was there for the foundation. They had a table 2 rows over, handing out information about the legal support services. She had not known Ryan would be here. She had not looked at the exhibitor list carefully enough. She stopped. She watched Ryan demonstrating 2-finger chest compressions on a practice mannequin to a group of teenagers, explaining the depth and the rhythm and the count. He was good at it. He was patient without being slow. He made it feel learnable. Gracie saw her first. "Vicky," Gracie said. Ryan looked up. A moment passed between them that had no name. "Hi," Claire said. "Hi," he said. The teenagers looked between them with the particular alertness of teenagers who understand that something is happening that is not about CPR door. "Could you give me 1 second?" Ryan said to the group, and he walked over. They stood a few feet apart. "The Foundation's booth is good," he said. "I sent 2 families to you last month." "I know, Deshaun told me." She paused. "The center looks great. I saw the enrollment numbers. 47 people in 6 weeks. Ryan. Yeah. She didn't know what she had been going to say. She had rehearsed several things, and none of them felt right now that she was standing in front of him. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I just wanted to say I'm glad you're here. I'm glad this exists." She gestured toward the booth, toward Gracie, who was now showing a small boy how to fold a bandage. "I'm glad she's okay." His expression did something complicated. "She's more than okay," he said. Claire nodded. She started to turn. Claire. She stopped. "Come back and see what she's teaching," he said. It was quiet. Not an invitation that expected anything. Just a door left open. She turned back around. She walked to the booth. She watched Gracie demonstrate the bandage fold to the boy, precise and careful, the way her father was precise and careful. When the boy got it right, Gracie said, "Good. Now you could actually help someone." Not effusive. Just true. Claire's throat tightened. She watched for a long time. The call came on a Saturday evening. Ryan's name on her phone. She picked up before the second ring. "Hey," he said. "Hey, one." A pause. Not uncomfortable. The kind of pause between people who have things to say and are deciding how to say them. "Gracie wants to know if you want to come to pancakes tomorrow," he said. "Sunday. We do it every week. She picked you specifically." Claire sat very still. "She picks people?" "She has a list," he said. "I don't fully understand the criteria." She almost said, "I need to check my schedule," because that was the answer she had trained herself to give for 17 years. Instead, she said, "What time?" 9, he said. "We're on East 105th. I'll text you the address." "Okay." Another pause. I'm not saying everything is fixed," he said. "It's not. There's still a lot I'm still working through. I want to be honest about that." "I know," she said. "I'm not asking for fixed." "Okay," he said. "Okay." She showed up at 8:57. Gracie opened the door. She was wearing an apron that said chef in training, and her hair was in 2 uneven braids, and she said, "You're early, we're still doing the batter," and held the door open like it was completely natural. Claire stepped inside. The kitchen smelled like butter and coffee. The table had 3 plates. The window over the sink had a crack in the corner that someone had sealed with clear tape. The wall next to the fridge had a height chart in pencil, Gracie's name at various years, the most recent line only a few weeks old. It was just a kitchen. It was also one of the realest rooms Claire had ever been in. Ryan looked up from the stove, nodded once. She sat down. Gracie climbed onto the stool next to her and opened the composition notebook, the same one from the first aid class, and said, "Okay, I have a question about blood flow and I've been saving it." Claire looked at Ryan. He had a slight smile, the first one she had seen in months. "She really does have a list," he said. The drawing was on the refrigerator by July. Gracie had made it at school, 3 figures standing in front of a house. The house had a fixed porch and square windows. One figure was tall with brown hair and a toolbox. One was smaller with braids and what was apparently a composition notebook. One was a woman in a blue dress standing slightly to the side, slightly turned toward the others, in the posture of someone who has just decided to stay. At the bottom, in careful capital letters, "The people who stayed." Ryan had been the one to put it on the refrigerator. Claire saw it the second Sunday she came to pancakes. She stood in front of it for a moment without speaking. Gracie came to stand next to her. "That's you," Gracie said, pointing at the figure in the blue dress. "I made your hair a little wrong." "The hair's fine," Claire said. "It'll be better in the next one," Gracie said seriously and went back to the table. Claire stared at the drawing for another moment. Then she turned around and sat down. The batter was ready. The butter was already in the pan. Ryan poured. Outside, it was just a regular Sunday in Cleveland. Nowhere to be. Nothing to fix. Just 3 people who had been broken and dishonest and brave and careless and sorry in various combinations, choosing, on a Sunday morning in June, to be in the same room and eat breakfast. Not fixed. Not finished. Not forgiven in the clean cinematic sense. But present. Which, for now, was enough. If this story meant something to you, if you believe in the kind of quiet, human courage that never makes the news, drop a comment and tell us what stayed with you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story. Every video we make is for the moments that remind us what actually matters. Thank you for being here.
This story follows Marcus Webb, a brilliant black toxicologist whose life was destroyed after he tried to expose dangerous research misconduct at a pharmaceutical institute. Once respected as Dr. Marcus Webb, he lost everything: his career, reputation, home, and marriage, after powerful people discredited his findings. Years later, he works quietly as a hospital janitor while raising his 7-year-old daughter, Maya, in a small but carefully organized apartment. Though the world now sees him as invisible, Marcus never stopped being a scientist. At the same hospital, 9-year-old Chloe Sterling, daughter of powerful CEO Eleanor Sterling, lies unconscious with a mysterious illness no doctor can explain. 18 specialists have failed to find a diagnosis. Eleanor, a woman used to controlling every outcome through power and money, watches helplessly as her daughter fades away. While cleaning the hospital at night, Marcus notices something strange outside Chloe's room: the faint chemical scent of DMSO, a compound he recognizes instantly from his toxicology background. His instincts tell him something is terribly wrong. Quietly, he begins observing patterns, documenting dates, tracking medical staff rotations, and recording chemical traces in a notebook. The evidence points toward a horrifying possibility. Someone is poisoning Chloe. The more Marcus investigates, the more suspicion centers around Dr. Thorne, Chloe's trusted physician. Thorne appears compassionate, ethical, and devoted, exactly the kind of man no one would question. But Marcus discovers a disturbing connection between Thorne's hospital shifts and Chloe's worsening condition. Behind the scenes, Thorne is secretly involved in a financial conspiracy tied to Sterling Corp stock manipulation, where Chloe's death would trigger massive profits through a carefully timed short sale. Marcus desperately tries to warn Eleanor, but his past and appearance work against him. His PTSD causes his explanation to come out fragmented, and Eleanor sees only an unstable janitor approaching her daughter's room. Security removes him, and he is fired from the hospital for suspicious behavior. Most people would stop there. Marcus does not. Working from a makeshift laboratory beneath his apartment, he uses his remaining scientific skills to create a diagnostic reagent capable of exposing the toxin. Knowing time is running out, he risks everything by returning to the hospital one final night. Inside Chloe's room, Marcus interrupts Thorne just as the doctor prepares another injection. Security tackles Marcus, and once again he looks like the villain. But before being restrained, he asks Eleanor to take a blue vial from his jacket and test the liquid Thorne dropped. She hesitates, torn between the trusted doctor and the disgraced janitor. Then she remembers the look Marcus gave her days earlier, not threatening, but urgent. A look of someone trying to stop something terrible. She trusts him. The moment the reagent touches the liquid, it turns deep purple-black, undeniable proof of poisoning. The truth finally surfaces. Police discover financial records and evidence of a massive conspiracy involving Thorne and an investment group seeking profit from Eleanor's tragedy. Chloe survives. The toxin is identified, treatment begins, and her recovery slowly starts. But the greatest healing happens outside the ICU. Eleanor realizes how easily she judged Marcus based on fear, status, and appearances. Instead of offering money or empty apologies, she visits his apartment and begins again, not with power, but with honesty. The story closes with hope. Marcus is restored to the scientific world as director of toxicology at Sterling Corp's new research lab. Yet he keeps his old custodial badge beside his new ID card, a reminder of who he was, what he survived, and the price of being ignored. Nearby sits a photograph of Chloe and Maya laughing together, proof that compassion can bridge worlds adults often divide. This story reminds us that truth does not become less true simply because the wrong person speaks it. Marcus lost credibility in society's eyes, but his knowledge, integrity, and purpose never disappeared. Sometimes the world dismisses people not because they are wrong, but because listening to them is inconvenient. The story also shows that appearances can be dangerously misleading. Dr. Thorne looked trustworthy, while Marcus looked suspicious. Yet goodness and evil rarely announce themselves clearly. Real judgment requires patience and humility. Another powerful lesson is that expertise and identity are not the same as social status. Marcus remained a scientist even while pushing a cleaning cart. Titles may disappear, but skill, character, and conviction endure. Finally, the story teaches that redemption and trust are possible. Eleanor learns to dismantle her assumptions, Marcus reclaims his place in the world, and Chloe's survival becomes more than a medical victory. It becomes proof that believing in the overlooked can save lives. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more emotional stories about resilience, justice, and second chances. And tell us in the comments, would you have trusted Marcus in that hospital room? Sometimes one decision changes everything, and your answer might reveal more than you think.